Hey everyone. You can tell by what's on the screen and the model in front of you. Today's going to be about the J1 or J1 Alpha, depending on the actual locomotive type. The engine in front is a Paragon 2 Broadway Limited engine, and I was able to pull up a couple of pictures, a couple color, a couple black and white, of some of the actual ones that existed since there are none left. And I want to go over just a little bit of the details, comparing to see what's missing from the model and how it actually looks compared to a real one. So I'm going to go and get a little closer on the actual model itself and skip the screen. I'm just going to go over and use that as a reference and see if I notice anything. I do have a blue line J1, but noticeably there's nothing really different between the other two models, even though there's quite a bit of a year gap. I do know that the difference between a J1 and J1 Alpha is apparently just what the boiler was made out of, so there shouldn't be any visual differences there. And I'll talk about one other major difference that is missed with all the models that Broadway Limited does, but let me go and move the camera a little closer and we'll get a bit more up close on the engine itself. Alright, like I said, this is a Paragon 2 J1 Alpha. I'm not going to go over any of the sounds or anything. It's some for other videos you can see. I believe I already posted one that shows a little bit of the demo of the sounds of this engine, which is pretty similar to most of what Broadway Limited does in a lot of their engines, including the whistle, the chuffs, everything else. It's mostly all about the same, which most people notice, but not really a huge deal. There's slight variations, but today that's just going to be, I'll skip, it's just going to be a strictly detailed video to get really up close with this engine. I got it about in the same position as what the picture I have on the screen shows of a real one, and the real one is in color, so I'm going to look at this from this angle, which generally on the front here you're going to have this plastic coupler. They include pretty much all their engines. I think they kind of expect people to swap it out, but typically with most of the old steam engines, especially with the Pennsylvania Road, that's usually a foldable coupler. The particular picture I'm looking at, that is folded into the plow itself, but me personally, I'd rather have a functional coupler rather than one that's probably not really going to work all that well unless you have scale couplers on all your rolling stock and engines. But this is a plastic coupler, something that will probably get swapped out. Most people do it anyway, just so that it looks better. It's not a brown. This little plastic coupler, it's not really very good. They tend to break. So going on up here a little bit, most of the details there that I can see as far as some of the grabs go going up the ladder and steps. There is a grab right here that should be here, at least, that I can see on the picture. But I don't really see one here unless it's very small molded. It's not actually sticking out. And it is very prominent, it seems to be on the picture, so it's just very minor detail there. But the rest of the front of the engine here looks about what it should, with the exception of, like I said, some of the molded grabs that should actually be a little bit more prominent. It's just pretty much the molding. Going up to the top here, I noticed that there should be a small cable going down to the headlight from, I believe this was the generator that ran the headlight that powered it, but BLI just puts a little bit of a tube back here, you can't really tell, but that's where the wire goes for the actual light itself. I said nothing major detail wise, but it's still something that's just a little bit noticeable. I'll go ahead and swing this around here, see if we can get a little bit better of a view of the actual side of it. I do have another picture here. I'm going to go move this up. I do have a very nice website to show off. I do use this a little bit. Let's see. You can kind of tell by the screen, that's the picture I'm looking at. The bottom couple of pictures have the actual model that whoever this is does. It's prrho.com. And he does a lot of, shows you how he does some of his detail work and things like that. And he does a little bit of layout stuff and a lot of weathering. So a website that I highly recommend. I like looking at what he's done, and they're very good references. So I'll put that link in the description below, as long as I remember. But I'm going to go and use the picture that he has on here for this particular side profile of the engine itself, so you can get a little bit more light on it. So like I said before, there's just little details from what I can see, not a whole lot going down the side of the engine. Past right here, obviously this is mostly just molded whereas you know, a lot of this should just be separate, but that's what you're going to get with a plastic model, and everybody knows that. And it's not that it doesn't look bad, it just, if you're really going for detail, that's something that you're actually gonna, it's probably gonna bother you. But there's still a lot of good detail coming down here by the rear trucks. All this piping going underneath here. That is all there. It's all mostly accurate. It looks like this box, I don't know what this is, but it looks like this is a little bit bigger on this particular engine I'm looking at on screen. And some of this piping should be a little extra coming around the boiler, or a little bit larger for that matter, especially this right here. Little things like this step is here. That's actually on the prototype, going all the way down. Not much boiler detail between the two, you know, relay and the model. So there's nothing really missed there. Picture that I do have, as it looks like a small hatch that is open. I do see a grab right here, or what appears to be a grab iron, but that's actually, there's a hole of some sort. It looks like it's supposed to be a hatch on the prototype, but there's nothing here. Don't really expect it. Maybe it's just particular to this one I'm looking at. But it can't really be for sure unless I go through enough pictures to actually see any kind of a difference. Nothing really that I could find as far as roof detail goes, but I can tell you that the hatch on this does move on the roof, and I believe my brass Q2s is permanent. It doesn't actually move, so I guess give and take what you can get. Small hatch, it doesn't really do anything, but it's nice. At least it does move. So we'll go ahead and we'll get this thing turned around so I can show the other side of the engine itself, and then we'll move on to the tender here in just a couple minutes. Okay, on the other side of the engine, a lot of the same kind of stuff, same types of little motor grabs that should probably be a little bit more prominent again, but you do still have same type of detail coming around here. A little bit extra probably should be over right here, but again, no big deal, especially if you're going to weather it. It's just going to be dark anyway. It's going to be probably heavily weathered with some dirt and some rust, so it should probably be overlooked. And the picture I'm looking at is black and white too, like most of the ones that you're going to see. I do have one color one right here, but there's not a whole lot going down the side that I can tell as far as detail go. There's the front, which does give me a pretty decent view. If you can tell, there is this air hose right here that they did add. That is actually on the prototype of both the pictures that I've seen, which is a nice added detail. It's not something you have to add separate, which might be a little bit painful depending on how you do it. And I know that stuff like that is usually easily broken, especially on freight cars. But coming around back to the cab here, I don't have a decent picture I could find of this side of it, but it does look very nice crisp detail here, especially with the cab number. Gonna go over a step on that here in a couple minutes after the tender with a little bit of the history of the engine, but nice gold detail around the cab, which I particularly am a huge fan of. I like how that looks. It's not just a regular green window. It adds a little bit more detail, and it kind of makes the engine come out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the tender, which there isn't a whole lot of detail to show. It is just a tender. These engines only came with what they call the long haul tender, the very large one. I don't know how many gallons it is. I don't really remember off the top of my head, but you have a little bit of detail, like it's a little bit of a molded, probably a door, something similar. And you have this piping that goes down here, which I believe was for keeping the water in the tender warm, so steam would run through this and keep all of the water warm in the tender so it wouldn't freeze during the winter. And you are going to have brakeman's house right here with the grab going around it. That's pretty nice. Don't really see any detail on the inside of it. Don't really expect it to be. It's a plastic model, it's not a brass. So it's still there and it's still nicely detailed for the most part. I can't really get a decent picture of the tender of one, but from what I can tell from pictures just looking from the front of the engine, it does look about the same as far as dimensions go. You have your train phone antenna. So from my understanding, this actually is your antenna itself. This is what's going to send out signal, and this is your receive antenna. So transmit and receive. Looks very nice. This is looks like it's a little bent, but no big deal. It's just an antenna. You do have your water hatches. They don't open. It's a nice color red over the back of the tender. a couple little extra details. Colo looks very nice, as with some of the Broadway engines. Usually come with a pretty nice colo these days. And come around to the very back here. Let's go and see if I can get a little bit to where it's a little legible. But you can see that there's the PRR on the back of it. You do have the reverse light step ladder for you to get up into the top of the tender. Go and lower this so you can see some of the detail by the coupler. But you do have the air hose on the rear as well. The back does come with a metal coupler, so at least that's already there. You don't have to change that out. It's just always the front, like with pretty much all of them. The antenna comes back down. And one thing I do actually want to point out is these right here, these little bulbs that stick out. You really see there's one on each side. Now these, from again my understanding, are supposed to be your marker lights. Like on the Q2, something very similar. Q2s actually light up no matter what you're doing with it. So if it's going forward, it's always going to be lit, even though it's the one leading the train, which, again, from my understanding, shouldn't be lit if it's leading the train. It's only going to be if it is a helper on the rear. So whereas most modelers aren't going to really care about this because you're never really going to use them, it'd still be a nice detail if they could at least put some kind of red gem in place, something that will at least show a little bit of red detail showing that, hey, this is a light and not just a molded piece on the back of a tender. Especially when you get engines like the L1 and the H10s where they have marker lamps and they're always lit no matter what, and you can't really change it. And the K4, I know especially in the new run, it has lanterns that aren't lit and they still have gems in them to at least show some kind of reflective property, so that way they're a lamp of some sort even though they're not on. And there's nothing here for these. Now, you could always drill that out and put some kind of small gem in place, that way it shines, it shows a little bit of extra detail, but might be something I'll do later on if I really feel like it. But like I said, if this is always going to be right next to a car, you're never really going to see it regardless. So unless you plan on using a J1 as a helper on the end, that one will have to be kind of designated so you can show off the detail of the marker lamps. Otherwise, you're never really going to see it. And if you did see it, it's probably going to be wrong. One thing I did actually notice, which is on the other side of this tender, I'll move this all the way around again. So if I can pull up the other picture of the left side of this locomotive, it seems to be on two separate pictures that I have right here around the second end. It looks like some kind of door or hatch of some kind. And whereas it's not really necessarily a huge deal as far as the tender goes, I know this is one molded piece of plastic like most of the engines are. It should be something along the lines of the other side where it's still molded shape of some sort that shows that there is something supposed to be here. And it's not a large door, but especially when you go through and I'm looking at the black and white photo of a one that is fairly heavily used, and you can tell that it is just based on the black and white, especially with the dirt and grime go. There's some stuff coming out of this. So for weathering purposes, that would be nice to show that, hey, this has some kind of a purpose. Maybe it's the seal isn't already there that well, something's leaking out of it. It's not really doing its job, and it's coming out, it's leaking. It's showing a lot more extra dirt, a little bit more detail coming out of the tender as the engine passes by. So I'm seeing that that's the only one on that side at least. And like most of the things that are on this is a lot of the missed details at least. It's not really a huge deal, but again, something like that, it's just molded. You already have great detail in the engine, especially when they've already done a couple runs of these. Now I know that they are going to make a Paragon 3 run here coming up soon. It should probably just be the same mold since it hasn't changed the whole time I think they've been making this. Maybe it will show up. I guess we'll have to see when the new run comes out. I do plan on getting one of those just to see if there are any differences. So whenever that does, I'll probably hop on and do a review and show this engine versus that if there are any differences. But one thing I did want to point out is on the tender, having a train phone antenna on a J1 was actually kind of a rare thing. I'm going to go and include a picture here right about now to show which ones actually came with as far as row numbers and which ones didn't. So we'll go and take a look at that for just a quick second. Alright, so reading that quick little paragraph, that's from a Keystone Modeler. If you're not familiar with that, you can Google it. They do quarterly articles. Typically there's a review in there, some other things that people have done. It's all Pennsylvania stuff, no matter what. It's very interesting to read if you don't know anything about it. I'd definitely get on there and hop on there. Free up till a point, which I think it goes back a couple of years, and past that you still got to pay for it. But there's a lot going back to the early 2000s. A lot of these, especially with the Broadway Limited when they were first coming out, showing a lot of stuff like this. It's good information. Knowing that there were 125 of these and only at most 33 had a train phone antenna. Now I believe this one did as far as this road number goes, but my blue lines does not. So it's either going to come down to, do I want to remove the antenna itself all the way, or I can renumber the locomotive to one that properly had a train phone antenna. So that might be something I try later on. It doesn't look like it would be too hard. I just don't want extra holes in the tender, but I do like to look at the train phone antenna, but I do like having something that would be a little bit different. So that's an opinion thing. Whichever I do, I'll probably do a video about it. But until then, this is a quick review of the detail, of a J1 or J1 Alpha for that matter. Same thing. And like I said, if you want to see the sounds, I do have another video of a quick run back and forth of what it does too on DC mode. If anyone would like to see the DC sound versions with the bells whistle and everything else, I can do that. Just leave a comment below and I'll try to get to it whenever I can. Alright YouTube, comment, subscribe, and until next time, see you later.